I remember the silence that greeted me when I opened the front door that October evening. It was the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, the kind that screams something is terribly wrong. My feet felt heavy as I stepped inside my work bag, sliding off my shoulder and hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. The house was too quiet. David should have been home from the construction site by now, and my sister Vivian had promised to watch little Ethan while I pulled another double shift at the accounting firm. The living room was dark, except for the fading sunlight filtering through the curtains. That was when I saw him. Ethan, my 5-year-old nephew, was sitting on the floor in the corner, his small body trembling. His arms were wrapped around his knees, and he was clutching a crumpled piece of paper against his chest. His eyes were red and puffy, and when he looked up at me, I saw something in them that no child should ever have to feel: fear, confusion, abandonment. I rushed to him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my rib cage. I knelt down and pulled him into my arms, feeling how fragile he was, how his little bones seemed to press against my chest through his thin shirt. He had always been small for his age, but in that moment he felt like he might break apart if I held him too tight. "Aunt Eleanor," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Mommy and Uncle David went on a trip. They said you would take care of me now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pulled back to look at his face, searching for some sign that this was a misunderstanding, a joke, anything but what it sounded like. But Ethan just handed me the crumpled paper, his small fingers shaking. I unfolded the letter with hands that did not feel like my own. The handwriting was Vivian's, that looping, girlish script I had helped her perfect when we were teenagers. But the words were nothing like the sister I thought I knew. "Dear Eleanor," it began, and I could almost hear her voice dripping with false sweetness. "By the time you read this, David and I will be far away. I know this will come as a shock, but we have been in love for a long time now. We cannot keep living a lie. I am sorry, but you have always been too blind to see what was right in front of you." My vision blurred. I had to read the sentence 3 times before the meaning sank in. My husband, my sister. How long had this been going on under my nose while I worked 16-hour days to keep us afloat? The letter continued, and each word was worse than the last. "As for Ethan, he is very sick. The doctors say he has only a few months to live. I cannot watch my baby die. It is too painful. You are strong, Eleanor. You always have been. You can handle this. I am signing over full custody to you. The papers are on the kitchen table. I know you will give him a good life for whatever time he has left. Do not try to find us. We deserve to be happy." The paper slipped from my fingers and floated to the floor. I stared at it, my mind unable to process what I had just read. They had not just abandoned me. They had not just destroyed my marriage and my family. They had left me with a dying child, a child they claimed to love, and run away to live some fantasy life together. I stumbled to my feet and ran through the house calling their names, even though I knew they would not answer. David, Vivian. I tore open closets and checked every room, but their belongings were gone. Their clothes, their shoes, their toiletries, everything. The only trace of them was the pile of legal documents on the kitchen table. I stood there in my empty kitchen staring at those papers. There was the divorce decree already signed by David. There was the custody transfer form signed by both Vivian and David, notarized and official. And there, at the bottom of the stack, was a medical power of attorney form that gave me the right to make all healthcare decisions for Ethan. They had planned this. This was not some impulsive decision made in the heat of passion. They had consulted lawyers, filed paperwork, prepared everything so they could walk away cleanly and legally, leaving me to deal with the consequences. The betrayal was so calculated, so cold, that I felt my knees buckle. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from falling. "Aunt Eleanor," Ethan's small voice came from the doorway. "Are you okay?" I turned to look at him, this little boy who had just been discarded like trash by his own mother. He was so pale, his cheeks hollow, his arms like little twigs. Vivian had told me he was sick, that she was taking him to specialists, that the treatments were expensive. I had given her thousands of dollars over the past year to help with medical bills. Now I wondered if any of it had been true or if she had just been stealing from me while planning her escape. I forced myself to smile, even though I felt like my face might crack from the effort. "I am okay, sweetheart." I lied. "Come here." He shuffled over to me, and I picked him up, something Vivian always said I should not do because he was too fragile. But he was so light, so heartbreakingly light, that I could lift him with ease. I carried him to the couch and sat down with him in my lap, rocking him gently as the reality of my new life began to sink in. The weight of Ethan in my arms felt both substantial and frighteningly insubstantial at the same time. I could feel each of his ribs through his shirt, could see the way his collarbones jutted out sharply beneath his pale skin. His hair, which should have been thick and healthy for a 5-year-old, was thin and brittle, breaking off in small tufts where his head rested against my shoulder. The more I looked at him, the more I noticed things I had somehow missed before. Or perhaps I had seen them and simply accepted Vivian's explanations without question because she was my sister, and I trusted her. His fingernails were ridged and discolored. His lips were cracked and dry. There were dark circles under his eyes that made him look like a tiny old man instead of a kindergartner. When I pressed my hand gently against his forehead, his skin felt cool and clammy, not feverish as I had expected. His breathing was shallow but steady, and when I placed my hand over his heart, I could feel it beating rapidly like a frightened bird trapped in a cage. "How long have you been sitting here, sweetheart?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice calm, even though panic was clawing at my throat. Ethan shrugged a tiny movement of his bony shoulders. "Since this morning," he said. "Mommy and Uncle David left when it was still dark. They said you would come home and take care of me. They said I should be a good boy and wait." This morning. They had left him alone for over 12 hours. A 5-year-old child supposedly dying left alone in an empty house for 12 hours. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Did they give you anything to eat?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Ethan shook his head. "Mommy said there was no food. She said you would bring some when you came home." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I blinked them back. Ethan needed me to be strong right now. He needed me to be the adult in the room, the person who could make everything okay, even though I had no idea how to make anything okay ever again. "Let me make you something to eat," I said, standing up with him still in my arms. "What would you like?" He looked at me with those big haunted eyes. "Can I have anything?" The question broke my heart. "Yes, baby," I said. "You can have anything you want." I set him down on a kitchen chair and opened the refrigerator, taking stock of what was inside. There was not much. David and I had been living paycheck to paycheck for months, ever since his hours at the construction company had been cut back. I had been working double shifts at the accounting firm to make up the difference, but it was never quite enough. Now I understood why we had been so broke. David had been siphoning money off for his escape plan with Vivian. I found eggs, some cheese, a loaf of bread that was only slightly stale. I made Ethan scrambled eggs and toast, buttering the bread generously and sprinkling a little cheese on top of the eggs to make them more appealing. When I set the plate in front of him, he stared at it like he had never seen food before. "It is okay," I said gently. "You can eat it." He picked up the fork with trembling hands and took a small bite of the eggs, then another. Then he started shoveling food into his mouth so fast I was afraid he would choke. I put my hand on his arm, slowing him down. "Easy, sweetheart. The food is not going anywhere. You can eat as much as you want, but you need to take your time." Tears were running down his face as he ate, mixing with the egg on his chin. I grabbed a paper towel and gently wiped his face, my own tears falling freely now. What had Vivian done to this child? What kind of monster would starve her own son? When Ethan had finished eating, he looked up at me with something like hope in his eyes. "Can I have more?" he asked hesitantly. I made him another plate this time with less food because I was worried about his stomach. He ate it more slowly this time, savoring each bite. When he was done, he slumped in his chair, looking exhausted. I carried him upstairs to the guest room and laid him down on the bed. His eyes were already closing before I pulled the covers up over him. "Sleep, sweetheart," I whispered. "I will be right here. I am not going anywhere." Within seconds, he was asleep, his chest rising and falling with small, rapid breaths. I stood there watching him for a long time, this broken child who had been entrusted to my care, this dying boy who I was supposed to comfort through his last days. Except I was starting to suspect that he was not dying at all. I was starting to suspect that something much darker was happening here. I went back downstairs and picked up the legal documents from the kitchen table, reading through them more carefully this time. The custody transfer was legitimate, filed with the county clerk's office, and notarized by a lawyer named Michael Patterson. I did not recognize the name, but a quick internet search showed that he was a real attorney with an office downtown, so that part was legal and binding. The divorce papers were equally legitimate. David had filed for divorce 2 weeks ago, citing irreconcilable differences. The papers had been served to me at work, but I had never received them. I checked the address on the documents and realized they had been sent to my office at the accounting firm, but the mailroom must have lost them, or they had been delivered to the wrong person. Either way, the divorce was going through whether I contested it or not. David had seen to that. The medical records were another story. They were extensive dozens of pages detailing Ethan's supposed illness and treatment. I recognized some of the hospital names, major medical centers in the area, but others were unfamiliar to me. The diagnosis was consistent across all the documents: progressive genetic disorder. No known cure, terminal prognosis 6 to 12 months to live. But something about the documents felt wrong. The paper was too crisp, too new, like it had just been printed yesterday. The font was slightly different from one document to another, as if they had been created by different people at different times using different software. Some of the medical terminology was incorrect or used in the wrong context. And when I looked closely at the signatures, I could see that they were all slightly different variations of the same handwriting. Someone had forged these documents, and they had done a good enough job to fool a layperson, but not a professional. I spent the rest of that night researching terminal illnesses in children, reading medical journals, and parent support forums trying to understand what Ethan was supposedly dying from. But the more I read, the less sense it made. The symptoms described in the medical records did not match any known genetic disorder. The timeline of his illness did not follow any recognizable pattern. And most damning of all, the treatments listed in the records were not treatments for terminal illnesses. They were treatments for malnutrition and failure to thrive. By the time the sun came up, I had made a decision. I was going to find out the truth about Ethan's condition, no matter what it took. If he really was dying, then I would make his last days as comfortable and happy as possible. But if he was not dying, if Vivian had been lying about his illness, then I was going to expose her lies and make sure she paid for what she had done. The next morning, Ethan woke up screaming. I ran to his room and found him sitting up in bed, his small body shaking with sobs, his hands clutching at his chest. I gathered him into my arms, holding him close, murmuring soothing nonsense words until his sobs subsided into hiccups. I had a bad dream, he whispered against my shoulder. I dreamed that Mommy came back and was angry at me for eating too much food. She said I was being greedy and bad and that she was going to send me away. That was just a dream, sweetheart, I said firmly. Your mommy is not coming back, and you are not greedy or bad. You are a good boy, and you deserve to eat as much as you want. Do you understand me? He nodded against my shoulder, but I could tell he did not quite believe me. It would take time, I realized, to undo the damage Vivian had done. It would take time to teach this child that he was worthy of food, of care, of love. I made Ethan a big breakfast that morning, pancakes with syrup, bacon, orange juice, and a banana. He ate slowly, glancing at me every few bites, as if expecting me to snatch the plate away. When he finished, he looked at me with wonder in his eyes. That was the best breakfast I ever had, he said solemnly. I am glad, sweetheart. We are going to have big breakfasts every day from now on, and big lunches and big dinners, too. You need to get strong and healthy. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It was the first time I had seen him smile since I found him, and the sight of it made my chest ache with a complicated mixture of joy and rage. Joy that he could still smile rage at Vivian for stealing so many smiles from him. After breakfast, I started going through the rest of the house more carefully, looking for clues about what had really been going on. In Vivian's bedroom, which she had been using whenever she stayed over to watch Ethan, I found a journal tucked under the mattress. My hands shook as I opened it, knowing I was invading her privacy but no longer caring. The entries were dated over the past 18 months, starting around the time Vivian had first told me that Ethan was sick. The early entries were mundane complaints about money and boredom and feeling trapped by motherhood. But as I read further, the entries became darker and more disturbing. April 15th, Ethan would not stop crying today. I locked him in his room and went for a walk. When I came back 3 hours later, he had finally shut up. Maybe he is learning. May 3rd. Met David for coffee today while Eleanor was at work. He is so much more interesting than his boring wife. We talked for hours. I think he likes me. May 20th. David kissed me today. I should feel guilty, but I do not. Eleanor does not deserve him. She is always working, always tired, always boring. She never has time for fun. David says I make him feel alive again. June 8th. Ethan asked for food today. I told him dinner was not until 7 and he would just have to wait. He cried for an hour. I am so tired of his whining. Maybe if he loses some weight, people will think he is sick and feel sorry for me. I had to put the journal down, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold it. Vivian had been planning this for over a year. She had been deliberately starving Ethan, deliberately making him sick, all so she could gain sympathy and eventually justify abandoning him. And she had been cheating on me with my husband the entire time. I forced myself to keep reading. July 2nd, David and I are talking about running away together. He says Eleanor would never give him a divorce, that she needs him too much. But if we just left, there would be nothing she could do about it. I like the idea of starting fresh somewhere new. Just David and me. No responsibilities, no boring job, no whining kid. July 15th, Ethan fainted today. I think I might be overdoing it with the starvation thing. Took him to the emergency room but told them he has been sick for a while. They gave him fluids and sent us home. The doctor looked at me weird, like he suspected something. I need to be more careful. August 1st. Met a guy named Marcus at a bar last night. Rich, successful, very interested in me. Had drinks and ended up at his hotel. Did not get home until morning. Ethan was fine, though he complained about being hungry. These kids are so dramatic. August 20th. Pregnant. Not sure if it is David's or Marcus's. Probably Marcus's based on timing. This is a problem. David will think it is his. Maybe I should just go with that. Men are so stupid about these things. September 5. Told David I am pregnant. He was thrilled, wants to marry me and start a family. I did not have the heart to tell him we cannot legally marry because he is still married to Eleanor. Also did not mention the baby is probably not his. Details. September 22nd. David came up with a plan. We will wait until after the baby is born, then we will leave. Eleanor can have Ethan. She always wanted kids anyway, and she is so much better at the whole nurturing thing than I am. We will take the baby and start a new life in California. Perfect plan. Just have to wait a few more months. October 1st. Created fake medical records for Ethan. Found a website that sells templates for medical documents. They look pretty real. Eleanor will never know the difference. She trusts me too much to question anything. She is so naive. October 10th. David filed for divorce. The papers should be delivered to Eleanor's work next week. By the time she realizes what is happening, we will be long gone. I cannot wait to get out of this boring town and away from that dying kid. Yes, I know he is not really dying, but it is easier to think of him that way. Less guilt. The journal ended there. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach repeatedly. Vivian had planned everything down to the smallest detail. She had created fake medical records, manipulated doctors, starved her own child, and had an affair with my husband, all while pretending to be my loving, supportive sister. And I had been too blind and too trusting to see any of it. I called my boss at the accounting firm and quit on the spot. I told her there was a family emergency and I could not come back. She tried to convince me to take family leave instead, but I was firm. I quit. I had already lost so much. I was not going to lose Ethan too by being absent when he needed me most. Then I called every hospital listed in the medical records. The first one, St. Mary's Medical Center, had no record of Ethan ever being a patient there. Neither did the second hospital or the third or the fourth. The fifth hospital, Children's Memorial, had a record of one emergency room visit in July for dehydration, but no other contact. The ER doctor's notes mentioned possible neglect and recommended a follow-up with Child Protective Services, but apparently no one had ever followed up. I saved all of this information, documenting every phone call, every conversation, every piece of evidence that proved Vivian had been lying. I did not know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed to keep track of everything. Over the next few days, I focused on caring for Ethan and trying to establish some kind of routine. I fed him 3 meals a day, plus snacks, carefully monitoring what he ate and how much. He was resistant at first, his stomach too small and unused to regular food, but I was patient. I gave him small portions and let him eat at his own pace. Slowly, he started eating more. I also started paying attention to the other signs of neglect. His clothes were all several sizes too big, hanging off his skeletal frame like he was wearing someone else's cast-offs. When I checked the tags, I realized they were the right size for a 5-year-old, but Ethan was so underweight that nothing fit him properly. I took him shopping at Target, letting him pick out new clothes that he liked. His eyes lit up when he found a shirt with dinosaurs on it, and my heart broke all over again at how easily pleased he was. His teeth were another problem. They were stained and showed signs of decay, probably from lack of proper dental care and poor nutrition. I made an appointment with a pediatric dentist, but the earliest they could see us was in 3 weeks. I added it to my growing list of appointments and things to do. Ethan also had nightmares every night. He would wake up screaming, calling for his mother, reliving whatever trauma Vivian had inflicted on him. I would go to him, hold him, rock him back to sleep. Sometimes he would tell me about his dreams. Dreams about being locked in his room while people laughed outside. Dreams about being so hungry his stomach hurt. Dreams about his mother telling him he was bad and unwanted. Each nightmare was a small window into the hell Vivian had put him through, and each one made me more determined to expose her lies. During the day, Ethan was surprisingly well behaved. He never asked for anything, never complained, never made demands. He would sit quietly wherever I put him, watching me with those big, serious eyes waiting for instruction. It was unnatural for a 5-year-old to be so compliant, so passive. Children were supposed to be loud and messy and demanding. Ethan had been trained out of all of those normal childhood behaviors, taught that his needs and wants were inconvenient and unwelcome. I started encouraging him to ask for things. "If you want a snack, you can ask me," I told him. "If you want to play with a toy, you can ask me. If you need anything at all, you can always ask me. I will never be angry at you for asking." He looked at me doubtfully, but over time he started testing the boundaries. "Can I have a cookie?" he would ask tentatively. "Can I watch TV? Can I play outside?" Each time he asked, I said yes, and each time he looked a little more surprised that I had not punished him for having desires. A week after Vivian and David left, I took Ethan to see my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who had lived next door for as long as I could remember. She was sitting on her porch when we walked over, knitting a blue blanket and humming to herself. When she saw us, she smiled warmly. "Eleanor, dear," she called out, "I have been wondering about you. I heard some commotion at your house last week." I sat down on the porch steps next to her chair, Ethan hovering uncertainly behind me. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you something. Did you see David and Vivian leave last week? Did you notice anything unusual?" Mrs. Henderson set down her knitting and looked at me seriously. As a matter of fact, I did. They left very early in the morning before dawn. I only noticed because I was up with my arthritis and happened to be looking out the window. They put suitcases in David's truck and drove off. But Eleanor, they did not take the boy with them. I saw him standing in the window watching them leave. It troubled me. She looked at Ethan, who was still hiding behind my back. "Is everything all right, dear?" I explained the situation as delicately as I could, not wanting to traumatize Ethan by going into details while he was listening. Mrs. Henderson's face grew grimmer with each word. When I finished, she shook her head sadly. "I always thought there was something off about your sister," she said bluntly. "Too pretty, too charming, too interested in getting what she wanted, regardless of who she hurt. And I saw her with David more than once when you were at work. They were not being as discreet as they thought they were. Why did you not tell me?" I asked, feeling betrayed all over again. Mrs. Henderson sighed. "Because I did not have proof, just suspicions. And I did not want to be the bearer of bad news if I was wrong. But I should have said something. I am sorry, Eleanor." I thanked her for her honesty and asked if she would be willing to write down everything she had seen, dates and times, if she could remember them. She agreed immediately, saying she would have the statement ready for me by the end of the week. As Ethan and I walked back to our house, I realized I was building a case. I did not know yet what I was going to do with all this evidence, but I was gathering it, systematically documenting everything, preparing for something. For what, I was not entirely sure. Justice, maybe. Revenge, possibly. Or maybe just the satisfaction of proving that Vivian and David were exactly the terrible people I now knew them to be. 2 weeks after they left, I took Ethan to see Dr. Evelyn Reed. I had sold my grandmother's pearl necklace to a jewelry store for $800, far less than it was worth, but I was desperate and needed the money immediately. The necklace had been in my family for 3 generations, passed down from mother to daughter, and it hurt to part with it. But Ethan's health was more important than sentiment. Dr. Reed's office was in a nice part of town, a modern building with large windows and a cheerful waiting room filled with toys and books. The walls were painted in bright primary colors, and there was a fish tank in the corner that immediately captured Ethan's attention. He stood in front of it, mesmerized by the colorful fish swimming back and forth, his nose pressed against the glass. A receptionist called us back after a short wait, leading us to an examination room decorated with cartoon animals. Dr. Reed arrived a few minutes later, a small woman in her 50s with short gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had a warm smile and a gentle demeanor that immediately put Ethan at ease. "Hello there," she said, kneeling down to Ethan's level. "My name is Dr. Reed. What is your name?" "Ethan," he whispered, still shy around strangers. "It is very nice to meet you, Ethan. I understand you have not been feeling well. Is it okay if I examine you today? I promise I will be very gentle." Ethan looked at me for reassurance. I nodded encouragingly. "It is okay, sweetheart. Dr. Reed is here to help." The examination took over an hour. Dr. Reed was incredibly thorough, checking Ethan's heart and lungs, looking in his ears and throat, pressing gently on his abdomen. She measured his height and weight, took his blood pressure, tested his reflexes. She asked him questions about how he was feeling, what he liked to eat, whether anything hurt. She was patient and kind, never rushing, always explaining what she was doing and why. When the physical exam was complete, Dr. Reed took several vials of blood for testing. Ethan whimpered when the needle went in, but he was brave, squeezing my hand hard but not crying. I told him how proud I was of him, and he gave me a small, brave smile. Dr. Reed also ordered x-rays of his chest and abdomen, a urine test, and a comprehensive metabolic panel. She wanted to see everything she explained to me in a low voice while Ethan was distracted by a toy to get a complete picture of his overall health. She wanted to rule out any underlying conditions that might have been missed or misdiagnosed. While we waited for some of the initial results, Dr. Reed brought us into her office. Ethan was back in the waiting room playing with a train set under the supervision of the receptionist. Dr. Reed sat down behind her desk and folded her hands, looking at me with a serious expression. "Ms. Vance," she said gently, "I need you to tell me everything you know about Ethan's medical history. Everything your sister told you, everything you have documentation for, everything you have observed yourself. Do not leave anything out, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem." I told her everything. I told her about Vivian's claims that Ethan was terminally ill, about the expensive treatments and specialist visits, about the thousands of dollars I had given my sister to help with medical bills. I told her about the medical records that had been left behind, about my calls to the hospitals that had no record of treating Ethan. I told her about the journal I had found about Vivian's deliberate starvation of her son, about her affair with David and her plans to abandon Ethan. Dr. Reed listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finally finished, exhausted from reliving it all, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across her desk and took the fake medical records I had brought with me. She studied them carefully, flipping through page after page, her trained eye catching things I had missed. After several minutes, she set them down and looked at me. "Ms. Vance, these documents are forgeries," she said flatly. "I have been practicing medicine for 25 years, and I know what real hospital documentation looks like. These are relatively sophisticated forgeries, but they are not authentic. The letterheads are slightly off, the formatting does not match standard medical records, some of the medical terminology is used incorrectly, and the signatures are clearly fake." "So he is not dying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, hardly daring to hope. Dr. Reed's expression softened. "Based on my preliminary examination, no, I do not believe Ethan is dying. However, he is very sick. He is suffering from severe chronic malnutrition and all the complications that come with it. His growth has been severely stunted. His bone density is extremely low, putting him at risk for fractures. He is showing signs of multiple vitamin deficiencies, including vitamin D, calcium, iron, and B vitamins. His muscle mass is almost non-existent. His immune system is likely compromised, making him vulnerable to infections. She paused, letting that sink in. This level of malnutrition did not happen overnight, Ms. Vance. This is the result of prolonged, systematic starvation over many months, possibly over a year or more. This was deliberate abuse. Can he recover? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Dr. Reed nodded slowly. Yes, with proper nutrition and medical care, he can recover. It will take time, probably a year or more, before he is caught up to where he should be developmentally. He may always be smaller than average because his growth was interrupted during critical developmental periods. But children are remarkably resilient. With consistent care, proper nutrition, and love, there is no medical reason he cannot grow up to be a healthy adult. I broke down crying right there in her office, great heaving sobs of relief and rage and grief all mixed together. Dr. Reed came around her desk and put a hand on my shoulder, letting me cry without judgment, simply being present. When I finally got myself under control, wiping my eyes with the tissues she offered, she sat back down and looked at me seriously. Ms. Vance, I am legally obligated to report suspected child abuse to the proper authorities, she said. However, I understand that the abusive parent is no longer in the picture and that you have full legal custody of Ethan. Is that correct? I nodded, pulling out the custody documents to show her. Yes, I have all the legal paperwork. Vivian signed over custody before she left. Dr. Reed reviewed these documents carefully. These appear to be legitimate and properly executed, she said. In that case, my obligation is satisfied as long as I am confident that Ethan is now in a safe and nurturing environment. Based on what I have seen today, I believe he is. You clearly care about this child and are doing everything in your power to help him. She leaned back in her chair. Here is what I recommend. I am going to prescribe a high-calorie, high-protein diet with vitamin and mineral supplements. I will give you specific meal plans and nutritional guidelines to follow. Ethan needs to be eating at least 6 small meals a day to start rebuilding his strength. I want to see him back here in 2 weeks for a weight check and to review his blood work results. After that, we will schedule regular appointments to monitor his progress. She pulled out her prescription pad and started writing. I am also referring you to a pediatric nutritionist who can help you develop age-appropriate meal plans. And I strongly recommend that you take Ethan to see a child psychologist. He has been through severe trauma, both physical and emotional, and he is going to need professional help processing what happened to him. I took the prescriptions and referral information, feeling overwhelmed but grateful. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much. Dr. Reed gave me a kind smile. You are doing the right thing, Ms. Vance. That little boy is very lucky to have you. I can already see the bond between you. You are going to be a wonderful mother to him. Mother. The word hit me like a freight train. I had not thought of myself as Ethan's mother, just as his aunt, his caretaker, his temporary guardian. But Dr. Reed was right. I was all he had now. I was his mother in every way that mattered. When we left Dr. Reed's office, I took Ethan to a toy store and let him pick out anything he wanted. He was overwhelmed by the choices, wandering the aisles with wide eyes, touching things reverently, but not taking anything. Finally, he found a stuffed dinosaur green with purple spots and hugged it to his chest. Can I have this one? He asked hesitantly, as if expecting me to say no. Of course you can, I said, my voice rough with unshed tears. You can have anything you want. He hugged the dinosaur tighter, a look of pure joy on his face. Thank you, Aunt Eleanor, he whispered. You are welcome, sweetheart. And Ethan. I knelt down so I was at his eye level. You do not have to call me Aunt Eleanor if you do not want to. You can call me whatever feels right to you. He thought about it for a moment, his small face serious. Can I call you Mom? He asked quietly, as if afraid of my answer. My vision blurred with tears. I would love that baby. I would love that so much. He threw his arms around my neck, still clutching his dinosaur, and I held him close, this broken child who was choosing me just as much as I was choosing him. Okay, Mom, he whispered against my shoulder. In that moment, standing in the toy store aisle with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and piped-in music playing through speakers, something fundamental shifted between us. We were no longer aunt and nephew connected by obligation and circumstance. We were mother and son connected by choice and love and an unbreakable bond forged in the fires of abandonment and survival. 2 days later, Dr. Reed called with the complete blood work results. As she had suspected, Ethan was severely anemic with dangerously low hemoglobin levels. He was deficient in vitamin D, calcium, iron, zinc, and multiple B vitamins. His protein levels were low, indicating muscle wasting. His glucose levels were slightly elevated, a sign that his body was in starvation mode and trying to conserve energy. But there was no cancer, no autoimmune disease, no genetic disorder, no terminal illness. Vivian had been lying about everything. I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen shaking with a rage so intense I could barely breathe. Vivian had systematically tortured her own child for over a year. She had made him suffer day after day, month after month, watching him grow weaker and sicker, all so she could justify abandoning him when it became convenient for her plans with David. She had not just been neglectful, she had been actively, deliberately cruel. That night, after I put Ethan to bed with his new dinosaur clutched tightly in his arms, I made a decision. I was going to do more than just survive this betrayal. I was going to make Vivian and David pay for what they had done. Not immediately, not impulsively, but slowly, methodically, carefully. I would bide my time, gather evidence, build my case, and wait for the perfect moment to destroy them the way they had tried to destroy me and Ethan. I started a detailed journal documenting everything about Ethan's recovery. Every meal he ate, every ounce he gained, every milestone he reached. I took photographs dated and time-stamped showing his transformation from a skeletal, haunted child to a healthy, thriving boy. I saved every receipt from doctor visits, every prescription, every grocery bill. I documented every nightmare, every breakthrough, every moment of progress. I was building a comprehensive record that would prove beyond any doubt what Vivian had done to her son. I also hired Frank Peterson, a private investigator I found through a referral from Mr. Sterling, a lawyer I had consulted about my custody rights. Frank was a middle-aged man with an unremarkable face, the kind of person who could blend into any crowd and never be noticed. That was exactly what I needed. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from my neighborhood, where someone might recognize me. I explained what I needed in careful, measured terms. "I want to know where they are, what they are doing, who they are with," I said, sliding an envelope of cash across the table. "I want photographs, documentation, evidence. I want to know everything about their new life." Frank studied me for a long moment, his expression neutral. "This is not cheap," he warned. "Surveillance, especially long-distance surveillance. If they have left the state, can run into thousands of dollars a month. I do not care what it costs," I said firmly. "I will find the money." And I did. I quit my job at the accounting firm, burning that bridge completely, and started a small business from home. I had always been good at baking, a skill my grandmother had taught me when I was young. I started making custom cakes and pastries, advertising on local social media groups, and through word of mouth. My first few orders were small birthday cakes for neighborhood kids, cupcakes for a church bake sale. But people liked my work, and soon I was getting bigger orders. Wedding cakes, anniversary cakes, corporate events. The money was not as steady as my old salary, and I had to work twice as hard, often staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning to finish orders. But it gave me the flexibility I needed to be home with Ethan during the day, to take him to his doctor appointments and therapy sessions, to be present for every meal and every bedtime. And slowly, painfully, I started earning enough to pay Frank's fees. Every month, Frank sent me a report. Vivian and David had moved to Los Angeles, renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica, just 3 blocks from the beach. David had found work with a large construction company, making better money than he ever had back home. Vivian was not working at all. According to Frank's surveillance, she spent her days shopping on trendy Abbott Kinney Boulevard, getting her nails done at expensive salons, having lunch with new friends at cafes that charged $20 for a salad. The photographs Frank sent showed a woman living her best life. Vivian looked happy and carefree in every image, laughing with friends, carrying shopping bags from designer stores, sipping wine on restaurant patios. There was not a single visible sign of guilt or regret. She looked like someone who had successfully escaped a life she found tedious and was now living exactly the way she had always wanted. But there was something else in those early reports that caught my attention. Vivian was pregnant. In the first photos Frank sent, taken just a few weeks after she and David had left Vivian, was already showing a small but noticeable baby bump. She was not trying to hide it, either wearing form-fitting dresses that accentuated her changing figure. I did the math counting backwards from the photos. If Vivian was showing in late October or early November, she would have gotten pregnant around June or July at the latest. But according to her letter, she and David had only recently fallen in love. The timeline did not add up. Either Vivian had been lying about when their affair started, or the baby was not David's. I remembered the entries in her journal, the mentions of Marcus Chin and other men. I asked Frank to dig deeper to find out everything he could about Vivian's activities before she left town. What he discovered was both enlightening and disturbing. Vivian had been leading a secret double life for at least a year before she left. She had been seeing multiple men, juggling affairs with practiced ease, lying to everyone, including David, about where she was and what she was doing. Frank found evidence of hotel stays with at least 4 different men. Credit card records showed expensive dinners, gifts, weekend trips. There were texts and emails, flirtatious and explicit, saved on cloud servers that Frank was able to access through means I did not ask about and he did not explain. Marcus Chin was the most frequent of her lovers. A wealthy venture capitalist from San Francisco, he had met Vivian at a bar in April and started an intense affair with her that lasted through the summer. They met at least twice a month at expensive hotels, with Marcus paying for everything. The affair only ended when Marcus's wife discovered some incriminating texts and gave him an ultimatum. Marcus had cut contact with Vivian in September, right around at the time she was telling David she was pregnant. Frank compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier with photographs, hotel receipts, credit card statements, copies of texts, and emails. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. Vivian had been cheating on David even while they were cheating on me together, and based on the timeline, there was a strong possibility that the baby she was carrying was Marcus's, not David's. I filed all of this information away, carefully, organizing it chronologically, creating a timeline of events that told a clear story. I did not know yet what I would do with it all, but I knew it would matter someday. The truth always mattered, especially when it came to destroying someone's carefully constructed lies. Meanwhile, Ethan was making remarkable progress. Following Dr. Reed's nutritional plan religiously, I fed him 6 small meals a day, packed with protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. Breakfast was eggs and whole grain toast with peanut butter. Mid-morning snack was yogurt with fruit and granola. Lunch was chicken or turkey sandwiches with cheese, avocado, and vegetables. Afternoon snack was hummus and crackers with cheese. Dinner was grilled salmon or beef with sweet potatoes and steamed vegetables. Evening snack was milk and cookies or fruit with nut butter. Ethan was resistant at first, his stomach too small and his appetite suppressed by months of starvation. But I was patient, never forcing him, always encouraging. You do not have to finish everything I would tell him. Just eat until you feel comfortably full, and we will save the rest for later. Slowly, his appetite increased. After 2 weeks, he was eating full portions of most meals. After a month, he was actually asking for seconds. After 6 weeks, he had gained 7 pounds and grown half an inch. Dr. Reed was thrilled with his progress, calling it remarkable and attributing it to consistent care and proper nutrition. But the physical recovery was only part of the battle. Ethan was also struggling emotionally and psychologically. He had nightmares almost every night, waking up screaming and crying, reliving the trauma of his abandonment and abuse. He was afraid of being left alone, panicking if I so much as went to another room without telling him where I was going. He hoarded food in his room, hiding crackers and fruit under his bed and in his closet, terrified that the supply would run out. Dr. Sarah Chin, the child psychologist, Dr. Reed had referred us to, explained that these were all normal responses to severe trauma. She worked with Ethan twice a week using play therapy and art therapy to help him process his experiences and build coping skills. She also worked with me, teaching me how to recognize his triggers, how to respond to his anxiety, how to create a safe and predictable environment where he could begin to heal. One of the most effective strategies was establishing routines. Children who have experienced trauma need structure and predictability, Dr. Chin explained. Routines help them feel safe because they know what to expect. It gives them a sense of control in a world that has felt chaotic and frightening. So I created routines for everything. We woke up at the same time every morning. We ate meals at the same times every day. We had bath time and story time and bedtime at the same times every night. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Ethan had swimming lessons at the community center. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he had therapy with Dr. Chen. On Saturdays, we did something fun together like going to the park or the zoo or a museum. On Sundays, we stayed home and had quiet time baking together or working on art projects or just cuddling on the couch watching movies. The routines worked. Within a few months, Ethan's anxiety decreased noticeably. He stopped hoarding food when he realized that meals were consistent and abundant. His nightmares became less frequent. He started sleeping through the night more often. He laughed more, played more, acted more like a normal child. He also started asking questions about Vivian and David. Where did they go? Why did they leave? When are they coming back? I answered his questions as honestly as I could without destroying him. They went to California to start a new life, I told him. They made some bad choices and hurt people, including you. I do not know if they will ever come back, but I want you to know that it is not your fault they left. You did not do anything wrong. They made their choices, and those choices say everything about who they are and nothing about who you are. He seemed to accept this, though I could see him working through it in his own way, trying to understand how parents could choose to abandon their child. Dr. Chen said this was a process that would take years, that he would revisit these questions at different developmental stages, trying to make sense of the senseless. One evening, about 6 months after Vivian and David had left, Ethan and I were sitting on the couch reading a book together when he looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Mom," he said, using the name he had claimed for me and that I had gladly accepted, "am I going to die?" The question caught me completely off guard. "No, baby," I said firmly, setting the book aside and pulling him into my lap. "No, you are not going to die. You are going to grow up healthy and strong. Where did you get that idea?" "Mommy Vivian told me I was dying," he said matter-of-factly. "She said that was why I could not eat very much because my body could not handle food. She said I would get sicker if I ate too much." I felt rage burn through me like acid. "She was wrong, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice calm even though I wanted to scream. "You were never dying. You were hungry because she was not feeding you enough. But you are healthy now. Dr. Reed says you are getting stronger every day." He thought about this for a moment. "So I can eat as much as I want now." "Yes, baby, you can eat as much as you want. Your body needs food to grow strong." He nodded slowly. "Okay, Mom, can I have a snack?" I laughed, a sound of pure relief. "Of course you can. What would you like?" As I made him a snack of apple slices with peanut butter and honey, I thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. Ethan was almost unrecognizable from the terrified, starving child I had found in my living room. He had gained weight, grown taller, developed muscles from his swimming lessons. His skin had a healthy glow. His hair was thick and shiny. His eyes were bright and alert. He smiled easily, laughed often, and was starting to show signs of a mischievous sense of humor. He was becoming the child he had always been meant to be before Vivian had tried to destroy him. I enrolled him in a good kindergarten program at a private school known for its nurturing environment and small class sizes. The tuition was expensive, eating into my savings, but it was worth it to see Ethan thrive in an educational setting. His teachers adored him, commenting on how bright and eager to learn he was, how kind he was to the other children, how polite and well-mannered. They had no idea what he had been through, and I did not tell them. That was Ethan's story to share when and if he chose to not mind to broadcast. Ethan made friends easily, his sweet nature and genuine interest in others drawing children to him. He had play dates and birthday party invitations, normal childhood experiences that filled my heart with joy and made me more grateful than I could express that I had been given the chance to raise him. But I still had not forgotten about Vivian and David. Even as I focused on building a good life for Ethan, even as I celebrated every milestone and enjoyed every happy moment, there was a part of me that was still waiting, still planning, still gathering evidence. Frank's monthly reports continued to arrive, filled with photographs and documentation of their life in California, and I filed each one away carefully. In August, almost a year after they had abandoned Ethan, Vivian gave birth to a baby girl. Frank sent me photos from the hospital images he had obtained through a contact who worked there. David was in the photos holding the infant with a look of pure love and wonder on his face, completely unaware that he might not be the biological father. They named her Summer after the season she was born in a name that seemed frivolous and superficial, just like Vivian. I stared at those photos for a long time, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Part of me felt sorry for David. He was being manipulated and lied to just as I had been. He thought he was starting a family with the woman he loved, building a life based on honesty and new beginnings. He had no idea it was all built on lies. But another part of me, the part that remembered how he had abandoned a supposedly dying child without a backward glance, felt no sympathy at all. David had made his choices. He had participated willingly in the destruction of my marriage and the abandonment of Ethan. Whatever happened to him as a result of those choices was his own responsibility. I asked Frank to keep monitoring them, to document Summer's early years, to watch for any signs that the truth might be revealed. And I continued building my own case, adding photographs of Summer to my files, noting the dates and details, waiting for the right moment. The years passed, and Ethan continued to grow and thrive. By the time he was 8 years old, he was completely caught up developmentally, his early malnutrition, a distant memory, visible only in the slight frame that would always mark him as a little smaller than average for his age. But he was healthy and strong, excelling in school, active in sports, and surrounded by friends who genuinely cared about him. He was also seeing Dr. Chin less frequently now, down to once a month instead of twice a week, as he had developed healthy coping mechanisms and processed much of his early trauma. He still had nightmares occasionally, especially during stressful times, like the start of a new school year or when something triggered a memory. But they were less frequent and less intense, and he was learning how to manage them himself. Around this time, I also started dating again, something I had not done since David left. I met Robert at a local farmer's market where I was selling my baked goods. He was a high school teacher, kind and patient, with a self-deprecating sense of humor and genuine warmth. He asked me out for coffee, and I surprised myself by saying yes. Dating as a single mother was complicated. Ethan came first always, and Robert understood that from the beginning. He never pressured me to prioritize him over my son. Never complained when I had to cancel plans because Ethan needed me. Never made me feel guilty for having responsibilities beyond our relationship. He was wonderful with Ethan too, treating him with respect and affection without trying to become his father or replace the role I had in his life. They bonded over a shared love of science fiction and astronomy, spending hours looking through Robert's telescope in his backyard, discussing constellations and planets and the possibility of life beyond Earth. Our relationship progressed slowly, carefully, both of us cautious after previous heartbreaks. But after a year of dating, Robert proposed, and I said yes. We had a small wedding with just close friends, and Ethan, who served as the ring bearer, and beamed with pride throughout the ceremony. It was perfect, intimate, and meaningful. Everything my first wedding to David had not been. Robert moved into my house, bringing his telescope and his books and his gentle presence into our lives. He adopted Ethan officially a year after we married, giving my son his last name and all the legal protections and rights that came with it. Ethan was thrilled, telling everyone at school that he had a real dad now, someone who chose to be his father, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. For a while, I thought maybe I could let go of my need for revenge against Vivian and David. Maybe I could just focus on the beautiful life I had built with Ethan and Robert, forget about the past and the people who had tried to destroy us. I was happy. Ethan was happy. We had everything we needed. Maybe that was enough. But Frank's reports kept arriving every month, and I kept reading them, unable to fully let go. Vivian and David seemed to be living a charmed life in Los Angeles. They had upgraded to a nicer apartment in a better neighborhood. David was making even more money, having been promoted to project manager at his construction company. Vivian was still not working, still spending her days shopping and socializing, posting perfect family photos on social media that made their lives look enviable and ideal. Summer was growing up in that environment, a pretty little girl with dark hair and Vivian's manipulative charm already evident in Frank's surveillance photos. She was enrolled in an expensive private school, took ballet and piano lessons, wore designer clothes, and seemed to want for nothing material. But Frank's reports also noted troubling patterns. Vivian was frequently absent from school events, leaving David to attend recitals and parent-teacher conferences alone. Neighbors reported hearing arguments from their apartment, though they could never make out the words. There were rumors of Vivian's continued affairs, whispered gossip among the other mothers at Summer's school about mysterious lunch dates and unexplained absences. When I read these reports, I felt a grim satisfaction. Vivian had not changed. She was still the same selfish, manipulative person she had always been, just in a new location with new victims. David was slowly realizing he had not escaped into paradise. He had simply traded one set of problems for another, and the woman he had destroyed his life for was not the person he thought she was. I continued to gather evidence to document everything to wait. I was patient. I could afford to be. My life was good. Ethan was thriving. Robert loved me. I had work that fulfilled me and friends who cared about me. I did not need revenge to be happy, but I still wanted it. I wanted Vivian and David to face consequences for what they had done. I wanted them to lose everything they had gained through their betrayal. I wanted them to feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused Ethan and me. The perfect opportunity came when Ethan was 15 years old and was invited to present his science project at a statewide competition in Los Angeles. His project on renewable energy sources had won first place at the local level, and he had been selected to represent our region at the state finals. The competition was being held at UCLA over a long weekend in April, with the awards ceremony on Saturday evening. Robert could not come because he had a school obligation he could not miss, so it was just Ethan and me driving to Los Angeles together. As we got closer to the city, I felt my pulse quicken. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. Somewhere in this vast sprawl of humanity, Vivian and David were living their lives completely unaware that Judgment Day was approaching. I had called Frank a month earlier and asked him to intensify his surveillance. I wanted to know where they would be during the weekend of the competition. I wanted to know their routines, their schedules, their usual haunts. Frank delivered as always, providing me with a detailed itinerary of their typical weekend activities. The science competition went well. Ethan was nervous but excited, presenting his project to the judges with confidence and answering their questions thoughtfully. When the results were announced on Saturday afternoon, Ethan had placed third in his category, earning a bronze medal and a small scholarship. He was thrilled, bouncing with excitement, talking a mile a minute about what he could do better next time. That evening, as we were getting ready to celebrate with a nice dinner, I suggested a restaurant I had heard about, an upscale Italian place in Santa Monica. Ethan agreed enthusiastically, not knowing that I had chosen this specific restaurant because Frank's reports indicated it was one of Vivian and David's favorite places, somewhere they went almost every Saturday night. We arrived at the restaurant at 7:30, right when Frank had said they usually showed up. The hostess seated us at a table near the bar with a good view of the entrance. Ethan was still chattering excitedly about the competition, too absorbed in his own happiness to notice my tension the way my eyes kept flickering to the door. They arrived at 7:45, right on schedule. David came in first, holding the door open for Vivian, who glided through wearing an expensive red dress and designer heels. Summer followed behind them now, almost 12 years old, wearing a sparkly dress that was too mature for her age and scrolling on her phone with the bored expression of a teenager forced to spend time with her parents. I watched them from across the restaurant, these people who had once been family and were now strangers. David looked older, his hair graying at the temples, his face weathered from years of outdoor construction work, but also showing signs of stress and fatigue. Vivian looked expensively maintained, her hair professionally colored, and styled her makeup perfect. Her body thin to the point of gauntness in a way that suggested either illness or obsessive dieting. Summer looked uncomfortable, squirming in her seat, clearly wishing she was somewhere else. I felt a pang of sympathy for the girl who was innocent in all of this, who had no idea she was growing up in a family built on lies and betrayal. They were seated at a table on the opposite side of the restaurant. I watched as David tried to engage Summer in conversation, only to be rebuffed as she continued staring at her phone. I watched as Vivian ordered a martini, then another, her laugh getting louder and more shrill as the alcohol hit her system. I watched as David's smile became more forced, his responses to Vivian more clipped, the tension between them evident even from a distance. Ethan, oblivious to the drama, was focused on his menu, debating between the pasta carbonara and the seafood risotto. I forced myself to pay attention to him, to engage with his excitement, even as part of my mind was calculating planning, waiting for the right moment. Halfway through our meal, Vivian got up to go to the restroom, weaving slightly as she walked past our table. She was more than a little drunk, her eyes glazed, her movements uncoordinated. She did not notice us, did not even glance in our direction. I waited 5 minutes, then excused myself, telling Ethan I needed to use the restroom as well. My heart was pounding as I walked across the restaurant, following the path Vivian had taken, preparing myself for a confrontation 15 years in the making. The women's restroom was empty except for Vivian, who was standing at the sink, reapplying her lipstick with shaking hands. She looked up when I walked in, our eyes meeting in the mirror, and I watched as recognition dawned on her face, followed quickly by shock and then fear. "Eleanor," she whispered, her lipstick falling from her nerveless fingers and clattering into the sink. "Hello, Vivian," I said calmly, though my pulse was racing. "I have been looking for you." She turned to face me, backing up against the counter, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice high and strained. "This is not a coincidence, is it? You planned this." "I have been planning for this moment for 15 years, I said. "Did you really think you could just abandon your son and disappear without consequences?" Vivian's face flushed with anger and fear. "I did not abandon him," she hissed. "I left him with you because I knew you would take care of him. I did what was best for everyone." "You starved him," I said, my voice cold. "You deliberately, systematically starved your own child for over a year to make him look sick so you could justify leaving him behind. You forged medical records. You lied to everyone, including me and David. You stole money from me. And then you ran away with my husband to live your fantasy life while your son, who you claimed was dying, recovered from severe malnutrition and wondered why his own mother did not love him enough to stay." Vivian's face had gone pale. "I do not know what you think you know, but you are wrong," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I have documented everything, Vivian. Every lie, every manipulation, every bit of abuse. I have Dr. Reed's medical reports. I have testimony from neighbors. I have your journal where you detailed exactly how you planned all of this. I have evidence of your affairs with multiple men, including Marcus Chin. I know everything." Vivian's eyes widened at the mention of Marcus's name. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to face the truth," I said. "I want you to stop pretending you are a good person who made hard choices. You are a narcissist and an abuser who damaged your child irreparably and destroyed multiple lives for your own selfish pleasure. And I want David to know the truth about Summer." Vivian's hand flew to her throat. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I am talking about. Summer is not David's daughter. She is Marcus Chin's daughter. The timeline proves it. You were already pregnant when you left with David. You let him believe the baby was his because he was useful, because he had money and you did not. You have been lying to him for 12 years. "That is not true," Vivian said, but tears were streaming down her face, now ruining her perfect makeup. "You cannot prove that." "I can," I said. "I had DNA testing done. I have samples from Summer and from Marcus. The paternity is confirmed. David has been raising another man's child for 12 years because you lied to him." Vivian slid down the wall until she was sitting on the bathroom floor, sobbing. "Please," she whispered, "please do not tell him. It will destroy him. It will destroy my family." "You destroyed my family," I said. "You destroyed Ethan. Why should I care about yours?" I stood there looking down at her, this woman who had once been my little sister, who I had loved and protected and trusted. I felt nothing but contempt. Then I turned and walked out of the restroom, leaving her crying on the floor. When I got back to our table, Ethan had finished his pasta and was working on a slice of tiramisu. "Did you see them, Mom?" he asked quietly, and I realized he had known all along. He had recognized them from the photos I had shown him years ago, photos I had kept so he would remember what they looked like, so he would be prepared if this day ever came. "I saw them," I said. "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly. "Can we talk to them?" he asked. "I think I want to talk to them." I looked at this young man who had been a broken child, this survivor who had grown strong and healthy and brave. "If that is what you want," I said, "then we will, but only if you are sure." "I am sure, Mom. I have been preparing for this my whole life. I want them to see who I became despite what they did to me. I signaled for the check paid quickly, and then Ethan and I walked across the restaurant to the table where Vivian, who had returned from the restroom with red eyes and smudged makeup, sat with David and Summer. They looked up as we approached David's face, registering confusion, Vivian's registering panic. "Hello, David," I said calmly. "Hello, Summer. I do not think we have been properly introduced. I am Eleanor, your father's first wife, and this is Ethan Vivian's son." David's face went white. His eyes moved to Ethan, taking in the tall, healthy, confident young man standing beside me. "That cannot be," he started, his voice hoarse. "The boy was dying. He should be dead," Ethan finished for him. "Yes, my mother told everyone I was dying, but I was never dying. I was being starved. There is a difference." Summer was staring at Ethan with wide eyes, her phone forgotten in her lap. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. "I am your half-brother," Ethan said gently. "Or at least, I am the son your mother abandoned when you were born. She left me to die so she could start a new family with David. Except I did not die. Eleanor saved me. She has been my real mother for the past 15 years. Vivian was shaking her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. "Do not listen to him," she said to David. "He is lying. They are both lying. They are trying to ruin everything." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I had stored years of evidence. I showed David the photographs of Ethan at age 5, skeletal and hollow-eyed. Then I showed him photographs of Ethan at age 6, healthy and smiling. Then age 7, 8, 9, progressing through the years, documenting his transformation. "These are Dr. Reed's medical reports," I said, swiping through scanned documents. She diagnosed Ethan with severe chronic malnutrition, not a terminal illness. Vivian forged all the medical records claiming he was dying. She deliberately starved him for over a year to make him look sick enough that abandoning him would seem like an act of mercy, rather than what it really was, which was profound cruelty and abuse. David was staring at the phone screen, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. "Is this true?" he asked Vivian, his voice barely above a whisper. Vivian opened her mouth, then closed it. No words came out. "There is more," I said. "Vivian was not just having an affair with you when she left. She was having affairs with multiple men. The evidence is all here. Hotel records, credit card statements, emails, text messages. She was seeing at least 4 different men while she was telling you that you were the love of her life." I swiped to another folder showing David images of Vivian with other men dates and locations clearly visible. His face darkened with each image, his jaw clenching tighter and tighter. "And David," I said quietly, "there is something else you need to know. Summer is not your biological daughter." The words hung in the air like a bomb, waiting to explode. David turned slowly to look at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of emotions I could not fully read. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dangerous. "Summer is not your biological daughter," I repeated. "Vivian was already pregnant when she left with you. The baby's biological father is Marcus Chin, one of the men she was having an affair with. I have DNA test results that confirm it." David turned to Vivian, and I saw something break behind his eyes. "Tell me she is lying," he said, his voice shaking. "Tell me Summer is my daughter." Vivian was sobbing, her face in her hands, unable to speak. "I can send you the DNA test results if you want," I said. "I can also provide contact information for the laboratory that performed the test. You can verify it yourself." "Dad!" Summer's voice was small and frightened, tears streaming down her face. "What are they talking about? I am your daughter, right? Tell me I am your daughter." David reached over and took Summer's hand, his face softening when he looked at her, despite the rage and betrayal evident in every line of his body. "You are my daughter," he said firmly. "You are my daughter in every way that matters. I raised you. I love you. That will never change." Then he stood up, pulling Summer up with him. "We are leaving," he said flatly to Vivian. "Do not follow us." Vivian reached for him, but he jerked away from her touch. "Do not," he said coldly. "Do not touch me. Do not talk to me." Everything was a lie. Everything. The boy, the baby, our relationship, all of it was lies. "I do not even know who you are." He took Summer's hand and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Vivian sitting alone at the table, sobbing hysterically. People were staring now, pulling out their phones to record the drama, whispering among themselves. Vivian looked around desperately, realizing that her carefully constructed life was falling apart in the most public way possible. I looked down at her, this woman who had once been my sister, and felt nothing. "Your life is over, Vivian," I said quietly, my voice cold. "David is going to divorce you. Summer is going to grow up knowing what kind of person you are. Everyone in your social circle now knows about the lies and the abuse and the affairs. You are going to end up alone and broke and despised. Exactly like you tried to make me." Ethan and I turned and walked away, leaving Vivian crying at the table. Behind us, I could hear her begging people for help, for understanding, for sympathy. No one was listening. People were recording her breakdown, her humiliation broadcast to the internet in real time. When we got outside, Ethan took a deep breath of the cool night air. "How do you feel?" I asked him. He thought about it for a moment. "Free," he said finally. "I feel free. Like I finally got closure. They do not have any power over me anymore. I am not that scared, starving little boy anymore. I am strong, I am healthy, I am loved, and they cannot take any of that away from me." I hugged him tight, this young man who had survived so much and come out stronger. "I am so proud of you," I said, "so incredibly proud." He hugged me back. "Thank you, Mom," he said, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for never giving up on me. You are the only mother I ever needed." The months that followed were tumultuous for Vivian and David, though I watched their downfall from the comfortable distance of my happy life. Frank continued to send reports documenting the aftermath of that fateful dinner in Santa Monica. David filed for divorce within a week, citing fraud, emotional distress, and irreconcilable differences. He hired one of the best divorce attorneys in Los Angeles, a shark who went after Vivian with ruthless efficiency. The DNA test David ordered confirmed what I had told him: Summer was not his biological daughter. Marcus Chin was her biological father. The divorce proceedings were brutal and became public record. Newspapers picked up the story, the scandal of a woman who had forged medical records to abandon her dying child, who had had multiple affairs, who had lied about her daughter's paternity for over a decade. Vivian became a pariah in Los Angeles, her name associated with deception and child abuse. Her friends abandoned her, her social invitations dried up, and she was left isolated and alone. David took everything in the divorce. The apartment, the cars, the savings accounts, all of it went to him. He also successfully sued Vivian for fraud, winning a substantial judgment for the money he had spent raising a child that was not biologically his. Vivian was left with nothing except debt and ruined reputation. But David also did something I had not expected. He kept Summer. Despite the DNA results, despite the betrayal, he told the judge that Summer was his daughter in every way that mattered. He had raised her from birth, loved her, cared for her. The biology did not matter. He was not going to abandon her the way Vivian had abandoned Ethan. The judge granted him full custody, noting Vivian's documented pattern of child abuse and neglect as grounds for terminating her parental rights. Marcus Chin wanted nothing to do with Summer or Vivian. When contacted by David's attorneys, he threatened legal action if anyone tried to involve him in the mess. He had been clear with Vivian from the start. His lawyer stated that their relationship was purely physical and temporary. He had never agreed to father a child with her and would not be taking any responsibility now. Vivian lost everything. She had to move out of the nice apartment into a cheap studio in a bad neighborhood. She got a minimum wage job as a cashier at a discount store. Her dreams of a glamorous life in California were shattered completely. She tried to reach out to Ethan several times over the next few years, sending letters and emails begging for forgiveness, claiming she had been sick, that she had not been in her right mind, that she deserved another chance. Ethan never responded. He had made his peace with what had happened and had moved on. She no longer had any power over him. David, on the other hand, surprised me. About a year after the divorce, he sent Ethan a letter. It was a long letter, pages and pages of apologies and explanations and regrets. He admitted that he had been manipulated by Vivian, but he also took responsibility for his own choices. He had abandoned a child he believed was dying. That was unforgivable, no matter what lies he had been told. He said he thought about Ethan every day, wondered how he was doing, regretted every moment of the 15 years he had lost. He did not expect forgiveness, he wrote, but he wanted Ethan to know that he was sorry. Ethan showed me the letter and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "What do you think I should do, Mom?" he asked. I thought about it carefully. David had abandoned him, yes, but he had also been a victim of Vivian's manipulation, at least to some extent, and he had kept. Summer had chosen to be a father to her despite the betrayal. That spoke to some level of decency, however flawed. "That is your decision to make, sweetheart," I said finally. "I cannot make it for you, but I will support you no matter what you choose." Ethan thought about it for a long time. Eventually, he wrote back to David. The letter was brief, but not unkind. He said he appreciated the apology, but he was not ready for a relationship. Maybe someday, he wrote, but not yet. He needed more time. David respected that and did not push. Meanwhile, Ethan's life continued to flourish. He graduated high school as valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to UCLA to study biology with a pre-med focus. He was brilliant and driven, determined to become a doctor so he could help other children who came from difficult situations like his own. He excelled in college, making the dean's list every semester, conducting research in pediatric nutrition volunteering at children's hospitals. He met Sarah during his sophomore year. She was a psychology major kind and compassionate and perfect for him. They were friends, first study partners and confidants before slowly becoming something more. When Ethan brought her home to meet Robert and me, I knew immediately that she was special. She looked at Ethan with such love and respect, and he looked at her the same way. They were partners in the truest sense, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions, building something real and lasting. They got married the summer after they graduated from UCLA, a beautiful outdoor ceremony in the mountains with close friends and family. Ethan asked both Robert and me to walk him down the aisle, one on each side, because we were both his parents and he wanted us both there for the most important moment of his life. I cried through the entire ceremony, tears of joy and pride and overwhelming gratitude that I had been given the chance to raise this incredible young man. Ethan went on to medical school at UCLA, where he thrived. He was at the top of his class, beloved by his professors and respected by his peers. He specialized in pediatrics, focusing on nutrition and developmental issues in children from disadvantaged backgrounds. He wanted to make sure no child ever suffered the way he had suffered. During his second year of medical school, Sarah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Sterling, after the lawyer who had helped me build the case against Vivian all those years ago. The first time I held my grandson in my arms, I cried tears of joy and relief. This was what family was supposed to be. This was what love looked like. Ethan completed his residency at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and was immediately recruited by several prestigious hospitals. He chose to work at a clinic that served underprivileged families, children who came from situations similar to his own. The pay was less than he could have made elsewhere, but the work was meaningful. He was helping kids who needed him most. He also established the Vance Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families who had taken in neglected or abandoned children. The foundation provided financial assistance, counseling services, legal aid, and community support. It was funded by donations and by a portion of Ethan's income, which had grown substantially as his reputation as a skilled and compassionate pediatrician spread. Through the foundation, we helped dozens of families over the years. Grandparents raising grandchildren after their own children failed them. Families who had adopted kids from foster care. Single parents who had taken in nieces and nephews or friends' children. Every time we helped someone, I thought about that terrified little boy in the corner of my living room, and I felt grateful beyond measure that I had been given the chance to save him. 2 years after Sterling was born, Sarah and Ethan had a second child, a daughter they named Grace. She was perfect with her father's serious eyes and her mother's gentle smile. Ethan was an incredible father, patient and loving and present in a way his own mother had never been. He broke the cycle of abuse and neglect, raising his children with kindness and respect and unconditional love. On Ethan's 30th birthday, we had a party at my house. Sarah was pregnant with their third child, and Ethan had just been promoted to head of pediatrics at his clinic. Sterling and Grace were running around the backyard with their cousins, children of friends who had become family over the years. Robert was manning the grill, expertly flipping burgers and hot dogs while chatting with guests. The sun was shining, music was playing, and laughter filled the air. As I watched them all, I felt a sense of peace that I had not known was possible on that terrible October evening so long ago. I had been tested by fire and I had emerged stronger. I had been broken and I had rebuilt myself into something unbreakable. Ethan came up behind me and put his arm around my shoulders. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" he asked. I leaned into him. This man I had raised, this man I loved more than life itself. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," I said honestly. "How lucky we both are." He kissed the top of my head. "I am the lucky one," he said softly. "You saved my life, Mom. You gave me everything." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. You gave me everything. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. You gave me purpose. You gave me love." We stood there together, watching our family, our future, our legacy. And I knew without a doubt that every moment of pain, every tear shed, every sleepless night had been worth it. Because this right here was what mattered, not revenge, not bitterness, not the satisfaction of watching our enemies fall. This was what mattered: love, family, the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son, the knowledge that we had survived and thrived and built something that could never be taken away from us. Vivian and David had lost everything because they had built their happiness on lies and betrayal. But Ethan and I had won because we had built our happiness on truth and love and the unwavering determination to never give up on each other. And that I realized as I stood there, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world, was the sweetest victory of all.